All right, everybody, get ready for a deep dive today into the Enneagram. We're going to be looking at Donkey from Shrek
Oh, fun.
as a type 7,
Okay,
the
I
enthusiast,
like it.
and specifically
Yeah.
the sexual subtype.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
this should be fun. So for those of you who may not be super familiar with the Enneagram, can you give us like a quick rundown of like the core characteristics of a 7 before we jump into the subtype?
Sure, yeah. So a type 7 on the Enneagram is somebody who is really seeking out new experiences, avoiding pain at all costs.
Yeah.
They're usually very charming, witty, and always looking ahead to the next thing. They're the adventurers of the Enneagram.
Okay, that definitely sounds like Donkey.
Yeah, for sure.
So how does the sexual subtype, or it's sometimes called suggestibility, how does that kind of add another layer to the 7?
Yeah, so if we think about the 7's core desire is to avoid pain and seek pleasure, the sexual subtype really focuses that energy onto relationships. It's like saying more, more, more. But specifically when it comes to connection and intimacy, they crave those deep, all-consuming bonds.
Oh, okay. So like Donkey's constant need to be by Shrek's side, even when Shrek's making it very clear that he wants some alone time.
Right.
That's a great example of this subtype.
Absolutely. It's not that he's intentionally being annoying. It's more that his desire for that intense connection overrides these subtle social cues. Like, remember that scene where Shrek literally tries to scare him away with, like, his ogreness?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Donkey's just like, hey, you're a rebel like me.
yeah.
It's almost like he can't even process the rejection.
It's a great observation. It's not even so much that he's ignoring the rejection. It's that his focus is so intently on the positive potential for connection that those negative signals get filtered out.
It's like his optimism is a superpower.
Totally.
So besides this like superhuman ability to bond, what are some other like telltale signs of a 7 with this sexual subtype, particularly as they relate to Donkey?
Well, think about how Donkey never stops talking.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The analysis that we're looking at connects this to the 7 sexual's need to fill space and manage anxiety with words. Like it's a constant stream of verbal energy trying to build a bridge to the other person.
It's so true. It's like he's talking his way into a connection
Yeah.
with everyone.
Exactly. And sometimes that spills over into the physical interactions too. Like he's constantly pushing into Shrek's personal space, not quite getting the hint that Shrek values his boundaries.
So respecting boundaries thing, not a 7 sexual strong suit.
Not initially, no. Their enthusiasm for connection can sometimes bulldoze over those more subtle social cues.
Yeah.
And it's not limited to physical space either. Remember how Donkey talks to literally everyone with the same casual, familiar tone?
Yes.
Whether it's Shrek Princess Fiona or even the fire-breathing dragon, there's no sense of social hierarchy for him.
It's like everyone's on the same level playing field in Donkey's world,
Totally.
which is, I mean, it's very charming, but also maybe a little like unaware of how that intensity might come across.
For sure. For sure. That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of the sexual subtype. Their almost childlike optimism, even in the face of danger or rejection.
Oh, this is so Donkey. He gets sold to knights. He almost ends up in a stew. Tells him to scram like a million times.
Yeah.
And yet he never loses that upbeat spirit.
Right? And it ties back to that core 7 desire to avoid pain.
Mhm.
The sexual subtype can be particularly adept at focusing on the positive, almost to the point of denying those heavier emotions.
Well-
They're like emotional acrobats,
Like a great visual.
always flipping over to the brighter side.
It's very endearing. But you kind of have to wonder, what does it cost him to maintain that level of positivity all the time? Like, are there moments where that kind of backfires for him?
Absolutely. That's something we can explore further as we go. But first, I want to highlight another characteristic that really stood out to me in the analysis, the Secus's sexual suggestibility.
Okay, you mean like that tendency to get like swept up in new ideas and possibilities?
Okay.
Oh, that is so Donkey. Especially when Shrek explains the whole layers concept of the onion.
Exactly. He's immediately captivated and starts applying it to everything. It's like his mind is a pinball machine bouncing between all these exciting new connections.
I love that.
Right.
So we've got talkativeness, boundary pushing, optimism, suggestibility. What else makes the sexual subtype so unique, particularly in Donkey's case?
Well, this is where the analysis gets really fun. It connects this subtype to the archetype of the jester, the entertainer.
Okay.
They use humor not just for laughs, but as a way to connect, deflect discomfort, and put others at ease. It's a brilliant coping mechanism, but it also reveals a deeper need for validation and belonging.
So he's not just like cracking jokes just because it's fun. It's like a way for him to kind of like navigate those tricky social waters and try to like win people over.
Exactly. And that constant need to entertain, to keep things light and breezy, it's another hallmark of the seventh sexual. But beneath that playful exterior, there's a real hunger for connection and a fear of being rejected or abandoned.
Wow, that adds a whole new layer to Donkey's character.
Right.
I'm seeing him in a whole new light now.
I know, me too.
But I think we need to take a quick break. We'll be back soon to explore more of Donkey's journey through the lens of the Enneagram. Don't go anywhere.
Sounds good.
Welcome back, Deep Divers. We've been unpacking Donkey's personality through the lens of the Enneagram, specifically the Type 7 sexual subtype.
Right.
We've seen how his just like insatiable need for connection, his boundless energy, and that like childlike optimism all play a role in his unique way of navigating the world.
And what's really fascinating is that Donkey's journey throughout the Shrek films actually shows us how a seven sexual can evolve and grow. He starts off as this kind of scattered, pleasure-seeking character, but over time he develops a deeper capacity for introspection, empathy, and commitment.
I love that. It's like we're seeing the Enneagram in action, not just as a way to like categorize people, but as a framework for understanding how we can all evolve and become more well-rounded individuals.
Exactly. And for a Type 7, that growth often involves tapping into the strengths of Type 5, the investigator. Think about how a 5 observes, gathers knowledge, and detaches from their emotions to gain a clearer perspective.
Okay, so Donkey's all about diving headfirst into experiences, while a 5 is more about taking a step back and analyzing things.
Hmm.
How does Donkey actually bridge that gap?
Well, remember that scene in Shrek 2 where Donkey confronts Shrek about his fear of losing Fiona?
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't try to distract Shrek with jokes or change the subject. He sits with that uncomfortable emotion, acknowledges it, and speaks to it directly. That's a huge step for a 7 who typically avoids those heavier feelings.
It's so true. I always loved that scene, but I never really thought about it in terms of like Donkey's personal growth. It's
Yeah.
like he's finally able to put his own need for excitement aside and just like be present with Shrek's pain.
Exactly. It's a pivotal moment where we see Donkey's capacity for empathy and emotional depth kind of emerge. He's not just running away from the discomfort, he's leaning into it.
And it's not like a one-off thing either. His relationship with Dragon also shows how he's evolving.
Mhm.
In the beginning, it's all sparks and intensity, very typical of that seventh and sexual energy.
Right. It's that like love at first roar kind of connection.
Yes.
It's driven by impulsiveness and that insatiable need for stimulation.
But then, like, their relationship develops into something more mature and stable. They build a family, they face challenges together, and they learn to navigate those inevitable ups and downs of a long-term partnership.
It's a beautiful example of how a 7 sexual can move beyond those initial patterns of instant gratification and find fulfillment in the ordinary, the day-to-day commitment of building a life with someone.
So it's not that Donkey loses his sevenness. He still has that, like, vibrant energy and enthusiasm, but he integrates those 5 qualities of introspection and emotional depth,
Mm-hmm.
which allows him to create, like, more meaningful and lasting connections.
That's a key takeaway here. Growth within the Enneagram isn't about becoming a different type. It's about integrating those healthier aspects of other types to create a more balanced and whole version of yourself.
And that's something we can all learn from, regardless of our Enneagram type.
Totally.
We all have those areas where we can grow and evolve.
Absolutely. But let's not forget the shadow side of the sexual whale. While Donkey's journey is ultimately one of growth and transformation, he definitely displays some of the less healthy tendencies of this subtype along the way.
Okay, so we've talked about all the positive stuff, the
Yeah.
charm, the optimism, the intense loyalty. What are some of those darker aspects that we see play out in Donkey's behavior?
Well, remember that tendency to prioritize their own needs and bulldoze over boundaries. That can sometimes manifest as what's called pseudo-empathy. They can recognize and even mirror your emotions, but they might not truly grasp the depth of what you're experiencing.
So it's like they're more focused on maintaining their own happy-go-lucky vibe than truly tuning into the other person's emotional reality. It's almost like a form of emotional bypassing.
That's a great way to put it. And it can lead to misunderstandings and hurt feelings, even if it's not intentional. It's important to remember that the 7 sexual's actions often stem from a place of fear, a fear of boredom, a fear of pain, a fear of being alone.
It makes you wonder if Donkey's constant chatter and need to be the center of attention is partly a way to distract himself from those deeper fears.
That's a really insightful point. It's like he's creating this whirlwind of activity and excitement to avoid confronting those more vulnerable parts of himself.
Okay, so we've explored the light and shadow sides of the 7 sexual through the lens of Donkey. We've seen how he embodies both the positive and negative aspects of this subtype. But there's one more concept I want to touch on before we move on. The idea of gluttony as the core passion of type 7.
Ah, yes, gluttony. It's not just about overindulging in food, but a deeper hunger for more experiences, more stimulation, more connection. It's like a constant thirst that can never be fully quenched. And for the sexual subtype, that gluttony often manifests as an intense craving for idealized relationships.
So it's like Donkey's not just looking for any friend. He wants that ultimate best friend, someone who will always be up for adventure, someone who will never reject him.
Exactly. He projects this idealized vision of friendship onto Shrek, which, as we see, can lead to disappointment and frustration when Shrek doesn't always live up to those unrealistic expectations.
It's like he's so caught up in the fantasy of like the perfect friendship that he misses the beauty and complexity of a real imperfect relationship.
That's a great observation. And it highlights the importance of understanding our own patterns and motivations. Whether we're a seven or any other type, we all have those areas where we can get stuck in unhealthy loops. The Enneagram helps us to recognize those loops and make more conscious
It's
choices.
like having a map of our own inner landscape so we can navigate the terrain with more awareness and skill.
Exactly. And that's what makes this exploration of Donkey as a seven sexual so valuable. It's not just about analyzing a fictional character, it's about understanding ourselves and the people in our lives with more compassion and insight.
Well, I'm definitely seeing Donkey and maybe even some of the sevens in my own life with a fresh perspective now. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I think we need to touch on one more crucial aspect of the 7-7 sexual subtype, how it compares and contrasts with the other two subtypes of type 7.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Comparing the sexual subtype to the self-preservation and social subtypes will really help solidify our understanding of what makes this particular flavor of the enthusiast so unique.
Okay, I'm ready to see how they stack up against each other.
Yeah.
So we've got the sexual 7 all about intensity in relationships and those like one-on-one connections.
Right. And then you have the self-preservation seven, sometimes called keeper of the castle. They are much more focused on creating a sense of safety and security for themselves. They're still enthusiastic and future-oriented, but they channel that energy into building a stable foundation for their adventures.
So they're like the practical planners of the 7 world,
Yes.
always making sure there's a comfortable safety net before jumping into anything too risky.
That's a great way to put it. They're the ones with the well-stocked pantry, the detailed itinerary, and the backup plan for when things go wrong, which they inevitably do.
Okay, I could see how that's a different flavor, 7. What about the third subtype? What makes them tick?
The social subtype, often called the sacrificer, is driven by idealism and a desire to make the world a better place. They're still fun-loving and energetic, but their focus is on connecting with others on a larger scale to create a sense of community and belonging.
So they're the ones organizing the charity events, leading the protests, and inspiring others to join their cause.
Precisely. They're all about spreading their enthusiasm and making a positive impact on the world. Their connections are less about that intense one-on-one dynamic we see in the sexual subtype and more about building a broader network of like-minded individuals.
Wow. It's amazing how the same core motivations can play out so differently depending on the subtype. But it's clear why Donkey is such a perfect example of the sexual 7. It's not just that he's fun-loving and adventurous, it's that his entire being is oriented toward those deep one-on-one connections. He's constantly seeking that soulmate, that ride-or-die companion.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to push boundaries and go to great lengths to get that connection. Think about how he inserts himself into Shrek's life, despite Shrek's initial resistance. He's persistent, he's charming, he's relentless in his pursuit of that bond.
And that's where his growth comes in, right? Yeah. He learns that real connection isn't just about those intense initial sparks, but about the day-to-day commitment, the willingness to be there through thick and thin.
That's the beautiful arc of his journey. He starts out as this scattered, pleasure-seeking seven sexual, but he evolves into a more grounded and empathetic individual who's capable of building deeper, more meaningful relationships.
It's a powerful reminder that the Enneagram isn't about putting people in boxes. It's about understanding ourselves and others with more nuance and compassion. And it's about recognizing that we all have the potential to grow and evolve.
Beautifully said. And Donkey's journey is a testament to that. He shows us that even the most scattered and impulsive among us can find their way to deeper connection and more fulfilling relationships.
Well, this has been a truly enlightening deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of Donkey and the type 7 sexual subtype, and maybe even a little more insight into myself and the people in my life.
I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, the Enneagram is a tool for self-discovery and for building bridges of understanding with others. It's not about judgment or limitations, but about embracing our unique personalities and using that awareness to create more fulfilling lives.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question. Do you see elements of the type 7, especially the sexual subtype, in yourself or in people you know? And how might understanding these patterns help us navigate our relationships with more awareness and compassion?
That's a wonderful question to ponder as you continue your own Enneagram journey. Remember, the more we understand ourselves and the people around us, the more we can cultivate meaningful connections and create a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and loved.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Enneagram with Donkey as our guide. We hope you've enjoyed the journey, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Until then, keep exploring and keep growing.